In the stillness of the early Saturday morning, Ferdinand Magellan, one of the most daring explorers the world had ever seen, found himself stranded. The seawater lapped gently against the side of his ship, but it was no ordinary morning. The tide had turned, and his fleet was stuck on a coral reef, far from the safety of the beach. The sun rose, casting a golden glow over the waters, but it brought no warmth to the hearts of the men aboard. They were in trouble, and they knew it. Magellan, a man of iron will and unyielding determination, refused to be deterred. He had come too far to turn back now. His goal was clear: to claim the Philippines for the Spanish crown and spread the Christian faith. But the reef had other plans. It was a natural barrier, one that even the mightiest ships of the time could not breach. The crew, exhausted from their long journey, looked to their leader for guidance. Magellan, ever the resolute commander, made a decision that would seal his fate. He ordered 11 men to stay behind and guard the ships. Their job was to provide covering fire with the Batox bombards, small cannons that could be used from the boats. But there was a problem. The reef was too far out. The cannons couldn't reach the enemy. Magellan knew this, but he had no choice. He stepped into the thigh-deep water and commanded the rest of his men to follow him. They were going to storm the shore, no matter the cost. The crew, heavily armored and carrying their weapons, struggled through the water. They were tired, and the weight of their equipment made every step a challenge. Some of the men begged Magellan to reconsider, to think of their safety. But he was like a good shepherd, unwilling to abandon his flock. He pressed on, leading the way. As they approached the shore, the reality of their situation became clear. There was no covering fire. The reef was too far, and the cannons on the ships couldn't help them. The men were on their own. They were also exhausted. The long, difficult journey through the water had drained them of energy. They were vulnerable, and they knew it. On the beach, the native warriors were waiting. They were not the disorganized, frightened group Magellan had expected. Instead, they were well prepared, led by a skilled tactician named Lapulapu. Lapulapu had set up a trap. His men were positioned in 3 lines, forming a crescent shape. The plan was to draw the Spanish into a narrow space and then attack from all sides. Magellan, despite his experience, didn't realize the danger until it was too late. The Spanish fired their harquebuses and crossbows, but the weapons were ineffective. The balls and arrows couldn't reach Lapulapu, and they bounced harmlessly off the wooden shields of his men. The noise of the guns frightened the natives at first, but they quickly recovered. They realized that the Spanish weapons were not as powerful as they seemed. The natives began to advance, shouting and jumping to avoid the shots. They hurled arrows, javelins, and even stones and filth at the Spanish. The Spanish were overwhelmed. They were outnumbered, exhausted, and now facing a well-organized and determined enemy. Magellan, seeing the situation worsening, made a desperate move. He sent a small group to burn a nearby village. He hoped this would panic the natives and cause them to retreat, but it backfired. The natives became even more ferocious. The group sent to burn the village was cut off and killed. This was a major blow to the Spanish, and it marked the beginning of the end for Magellan. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Magellan ordered a withdrawal to the boats. He handled it skillfully, dividing his men into 2 groups. One group held off the natives while the others tried to cross the trenches and reach the boats. At first, it seemed to be working, but then disaster struck. The Spanish got stuck in the last trench. The delay was all Lapulapu needed. He split his forces and sent them around the flanks of the Spanish, cutting off their retreat. Magellan's decision to leave his Marines behind now proved fatal. The discipline of the landing force crumbled. Nearly 40 men broke and ran for the sea. They reached the boats and hid there, leaving Magellan and a small group of loyal men to fight alone. The final battle was brutal and lasted over an hour. The Spanish, vastly outnumbered and exhausted, fought with all their might, but it was a losing battle. The entire scene played out in front of a horrified audience. The Raja King of Cebu, Prince Lumai, the Cacique Zula, and other chieftains watched from their boats, unable to help. The newly converted Filipinos, who had been baptized by the Spanish, waited for a miracle. They prayed to the Madonna, the saints, and Jesus Christ, but no divine intervention came. Magellan, a man who had defied the odds and achieved the impossible, had no miracles left. In the end, a small group of Cebu warriors, unable to bear the sight of their godfather in distress, landed on Mactan to try to rescue Magellan. But their efforts were cut short by a wild shot from a Spanish gunner. The shot, fired in panic, killed 4 of the rescuers and scattered the rest. It was a tragic end to a desperate situation. Ferdinand Magellan, Knight Commander of the Order of Santiago and emissary of His Christian Majesty of Spain, died on the shores of Mactan. His body was never recovered. He had achieved his goal of circumnavigating the globe, but at a terrible cost. His death marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in the history of exploration and colonization. The story of Magellan's last stand is a powerful reminder of the risks and sacrifices made in the name of exploration and conquest. It is a tale of bravery, hubris, and the unpredictable nature of human conflict. Magellan's legacy lives on, not just as a great explorer, but as a symbol of the complexities of human ambition and the price we are willing to pay for our dreams.